Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here. I'm very honored to be here at my 6th AWE and excited to welcome this panel, two of whom are here for the first time. So we have Brian Mullins from DAQRI, Jesper with IBM, and Neil with Dell. And if we can just start perhaps by letting you guys introduce yourselves and tell the audience how you are working with augmented reality today.
Great. Well, I'll start. So Neil Hand at Dell. This is my first time at this event, but I run a product innovation team in the client business, and I own bringing commercial reality for augmented, virtual reality, in fact, any extended reality solution to our business or consumer customers. And really, that's the vision of how do we quickly bring more value to those customers out there.
Thanks. So I'm Jesper. I work for IBM. I'm part of the Watson IoT, so Internet of Things. And it's also my first time to have the pleasure of being here at the AWE. The thing I'm working with is around digital twin and digital thread, particularly for our industrial customers. And AR is a very key component for how you create a digital twin.
I'm Brian Mullins, founder and CEO of DAQRI. I think it's my 7th AWE. And at DAQRI, we make augmented reality hardware and software. And a large part of our focus is around making those products solve problems in industry and enterprise and adapting the technology to what companies need.
So this panel is really focused on the scalability of augmented reality solutions in the enterprise. And one of the things that we think about, and one of the ways that you can sort of conceptualize how augmented reality plays in that space, is by providing the user interface for the Internet of Things or for big data. So Jesper, maybe you can start with kind of explaining what digital twin means in your world and how AR interacts with digital twin and digital thread.
Sure. Thank you for that question. So digital twin is a concept about how you can digitalize the physical object or physical product, and how you can use the digitalization in the way that you are designing your product, the way you are building your product, or the way that you're actually operating and maintaining out in the field. In terms of how we look at it is that if you don't have a feedback loop from the product that you're using in the field back to your design or back to your manufacturing, you don't have a full closed loop. We often talk about design for analytics or analytics for design. And I almost, when we had a little chat before, design for AR or AR for design is kind of the same thing. And AR comes in to you leveraging all the digital information that you will have available through the different systems across the life cycle of a product. And you can leveraging that digitalization in how you are maintaining the product or how you're manufacturing it. And you can use it in terms of a visualization.
And maybe we can also, so Neil, maybe you can tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, what is the opportunity in the enterprise and what are the barriers? Why are enterprises interested in adopting AR in the first place? And how do you actually approach that and make it easy for them to say yes and move forward?
Yeah, I think an important part is, we have a lot of great technologies to go do these kinds of things, but actually bringing it into commercial reality, we've seen over the last few years huge interest and desire in the product organizations, the business units within larger companies to be able to go do things. Getting to proof of concept is fairly easy. Getting to production volume then involves lots of parts of the organizations. Okay. And so for us, a lot of the focus is, how do you actually get those proof of concepts to the point where the IT organization doesn't get in the way of being able to go off and deploy, the security organization and everything else? Putting something as a concept point into a design group, a manufacturing group, whatever else, can happen pretty easily within those organizations. When they want to get to the next level, that's where we think it's important to actually bring some scalability to it, as well as partnerships between companies like IBM, DAQRI, Dell, to be able to bring all of our skills to bear to actually get that faster into those organizations.
Mm-hmm. And Brian, maybe you can share a little bit about, from your perspective, what are the barriers and what are the ways in which you're addressing those barriers from both a software and a hardware perspective at DAQRI?
I think in augmented reality in general, it's a technology that can do a lot of things, and it's something that people get excited about very quickly. And the industry as a whole is kind of focused on how do we take this and how do we make it so customers adapt the way that they do things in order to use this augmented reality technology, this demo that was made or this proof of concept. And the truth is, I think in order for augmented reality to really scale as an industry, we need to be looking at how do we adapt augmented reality to industry better, and how do we make sure that it's solving the right problems. And then when you do that and you take a step back and you look at the adoption curves, you want to find the partners that are going to facilitate it for those industries, for those enterprises. A solution for enterprise with augmented reality isn't 90 to 100% the device that they buy. In reality, that's going to play a 20 to 30% part of the overall solution. And being able to connect with the infrastructure and systems that are in place, being able to leverage tools that allow workers to make decisions based on IoT data, that's where the real power of the technology comes in. And that's how you speed up the adoption. That's how you really make value for the customers.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's really important. A few weeks ago, I was with 20 CIOs of companies that everybody in this room, they'd recognize the names of these companies. Only 2 of them had ever sat inside an AR world. Only 2 had ever experienced what that is. Those are the kind of leaders in companies that actually help add the oil that makes it quicker and easier to go and bring these things into their companies. If they don't actually understand how it's going to apply to their business, why it's going to help them, there'll be friction, and friction slows the adoption of these things. And I think it's very clear. There's value in lots of parts of businesses to be able to go do this.
So are we nearing an inflection point where those leaders are starting to realize that they need to start paying attention and that they need to understand where, how do you integrate it into a large-scale business? How can we support that? How can we actually speed up the adoption and speed up the inflection curve?
Yeah, I believe so. This same group a year before was sort of going, what's VR? Now they're saying, well, what's AR? What are the 42 different Rs that exist out there? I created 42. You might recognize the number. But they're now looking at what it is, and I think it is. The adoption point is coming in. Now it's how do you take friction out of the rate with which the curve, the adoption can actually happen. And that's I think, where we're at.
But I also think...
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so one of the things that I think when we are to do adoption of new technology is also show what you actually can do with it. And sometimes, business leaders and technology leaders, they need to, touch and feel it. And one other thing that we see is that when you're looking at how you can adopt the Internet of Things and how you can connect things and how you can collect the data and do cognitive on run. And obviously, in IBM, we are focusing a lot of cognitive computing and how you can leveraging our Watson to actually do a lot of learning. And I have seen that as soon as you start showing what you actually can do, people understand it a lot better, and they want to start learning about it, and they want to start adopting it. I had the opportunity to meet with a smartphone company on Friday, and I showed him a very short video about how you can use AR to actually do repairs of smartphones. Mm-hmm. And they said, we need to go and learn this.
Yeah, we were talking earlier before the panel about how augmented reality kind of provides that last mile solution for some of these insights that are being generated in the cloud. So IoT has a hardware component where you're deploying sensors at a broad scale throughout the enterprise or throughout a manufacturing environment or throughout a field work environment. And then you're collecting big data, you're generating those insights, and then there's actually a gap that AR can fill, where those insights are being stored in the cloud or perhaps being displayed in a control room, but when you have an AR device that goes everywhere with you, it can connect those insights to the worker visually and provide that last mile solution. So maybe, what are some of the things that Watson is being used for today in industry and in enterprise?
So Watson was obviously in the beginning used a lot for, some people may have seen the Jeopardy. It was more a proof of concept. about what you actually can do with high power cognitive computing and AR. It was, the first thing we did with it was actually doing healthcare. So we sent Watson to medical school to learn about how to diagnose cancer and things like that. And actually it's doing significantly better than the doctors can, because Watson can read a lot of information very fast and make senses out of it. But what I see from a more Internet of Things perspective is that, and we will have an opportunity to show it here, is actually when you're combining your voice recognition, visual inspection, or visual recognition, vibration, sensing and things like that, and you can put that as part of your AR, which is typically seen as a visual thing. You can actually start saying, hey, Watson, what does this mean that this pump is running at this temperature? And he can run and say, well, it has run on this scale. And when the technician is looking at it, out in the field, you can get real-time data. And that's where Watson plays a key role to do the analytics.
That's one of the most, I think, interesting parts about where we're seeing augmented reality develop, is that when you have this tool that augments your capabilities, that's going to have an impact on workforce development. That's going to have an impact on how we learn new things and how we train workers. And when that's scaled broadly across the economy, there's some really interesting opportunities. So, Brian, I know that you were invited to be an expert witness in the first congressional hearing on augmented reality in the fall, and that was one of the main topics of discussion, is actually how augmented reality can support rapid retraining in the workplace. Is that, can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting for the industry that the Senate is taking notice and wants to understand more and how regulations apply. I think it all goes back to the power of the medium to empower workers to make decisions. Connecting to these expert systems that traditionally live in data centers, but being able to make it so that a worker can have that access in situ, with the context of what they're looking at, what they're working on, to support decision making with that information. That's an exponential increase in the value of that information, is when you can make a real decision with it, and when you can empower a worker directly with it. Everyone has seen in the studies on AR that you can reduce the time it takes to learn something. You can reduce the human errors. You can improve retention. You can do things as drastic as transitioning a 2-year vocational school to be a 6-week on-the-job training, with better outcomes, and that's really exciting. And I think tying back to the idea of deploying into the enterprise and scaling this is, a lot of companies can buy 5 or 10 of something to try it out. To be able to wrap these things up in a solution where they can buy it for thousands or tens of thousands of workers is the transition that augmented reality as an industry needs to get through. Partnering with companies that provide those solutions that enterprises trust to deliver the infrastructure, to deliver the solutions, is how augmented reality scales and how it reaches all of those workers, how it empowers them to do what they do better and have access to this information and these intelligent systems.
So we know that that's something Dell is great at. Where do you see Dell, Neil, playing in this ecosystem?
Well, I think a lot of our focus is that the demand is there. The business units are finding the ways to go use it. The technology is reaching a maturity point where we can go do that. I think Brian points out going to that scale, delivery around the world, service, deployment, redeployment is a critical element of where we'll add a lot of value in that. And bringing the ecosystem together, finding the right partners that have the right technologies on the hardware side, on the software side. DAQRI brings a lot of that. Others, the content creation, the data management, what's going on in artificial intelligence in the back end, to bring that together and then quickly be able to deploy it. And from my perspective, take a lot of the friction out of it. I touched on it earlier. The IT organization is your friend and can also slow you down a lot. How do you help get past that? The CISO is going to care a bloody lot about whether or not that critical information is leaking out of a company. How do you make sure that that element is understood up front? And that's what we've been working for the last 33 years to do. So being able to bring that global scale.
The security aspect of that, the MDM aspect of that, there's all of these different areas. So open question for any of you. What are some of the best use cases that you've seen of AR in the enterprise today?
You know, a lot of my, I'll start off. A lot of my favorites are when you look at field service engineers who are responsible for many different types of maintenance for a piece of equipment. You look at the economics of something like sustainable power in say wind. To see a field service engineer that has to get on a boat and ascend wind turbines off the coast, and when he gets there, he's responsible for electrical power systems, fluid power systems, mechanical power systems. Could be 600-700 different work instructions to maintain that, and they may only do some of those, maybe a dozen on a regular basis. So there's a lot of variability, very high mix environment, and if that worker gets there and can't solve the problem, somebody else has to come back, and it actually starts to break the unit economics of the maintenance and repair for the wind turbine. Being able to have access at your fingertips, that's really exciting, and to actually start to support the economies of scale that are necessary in those industries in a new way. It's a tool that they didn't have previously to address that, to bridge that gap, and to really make that type of knowledge available. And then applying that into worker training and portability within workforces, is the logical next step and progression for that.
So I can add a little bit on that, maybe not so much on the AR side per se, but also how you're leveraging Internet of Things and connectivity of devices, and how you can actually leveraging real-time data that you are getting. You used an example of a wind turbine. I also have an example of a washing machine. We all have washing machines and dryers at home. And when they break, how many times does a service technician have to come out? 3 times. But with the connectivity that is now high speed and easy available, the collecting of data and sensors, you actually can send a technician out once to do the repair of that. And he may choose to have an AR way of looking at the washing machine and looking at how to repair it and so on. So that's one example. Not necessarily an enterprise, but that's one example. It's all linked back to digital twin, which is the key component for the industrial sector.
And briefly, I think for me, one of them was one of those where you see the aha moment of how the technology actually changes the way people could collaborate and actually get to better answers. In oil and gas exploration, we put a proof of concept together that the geologists, when looking at oil exploration, were like, we know everything we need to know. We've got all the data. We can put it on these big screens that we have in front of us here, and we can see everything. And we were working with a company, and they says, we think there's a better way. And we created 3D models, showed them, and suddenly the light went off in several of their eyes. They're going, we can collaborate together and actually look through the data, lots of big data, in different ways than have been done before, and then be able to start making decisions about it. And those are really intelligent people, but they'd got stuck in the way they worked. This is actually a way to change the way they work, and that changes the way workforces evolve and changes the way the businesses get value out of people. That in itself, to me, just was like, I love those aha moments, particularly around really smart, intelligent people that got stuck in doing it one way before.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think we're at that point now where we understand, based on the research and based on some of the pilots, how AR can improve outcomes, how it can improve efficiency, how it can improve quality. And we're just at that point now where we're building these foundational partnerships that are going to take it to scale in the enterprise. And I'm really excited to see how that develops. So thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you. We have a few other sessions that DAQRI is doing at the event. If you're interested in finding out about the Watson partnership, come and see us at the booth. Come and see our software and hardware presentations. So thank you so much.
Thank you.